All righty, we are live on Facebook and live on Zoom, and we're at 9:02. And would we like to get going?
Yes. Let's move on. First of all, I would love really to thank you, Janice, so much for being here today, really contributing to this phenomena of this time of change. And let me introduce you. Janet, in fact, she is the she served as the chair of the global board of the ICF, and also served as the chair of the ICF Foundation, responsible about social progress. And of course, with many C-level positions handling that, Janet just been through lots of executive coaching from all around the world, in different nations, different countries, with different levels, either in government or private sectors. And just personally, to introduce myself as well, I'm Ahmed Ageel. I'm the past president of the ICF Saudi Arabia chapter. And my relationship with Janet started with being really connected in this coaching hub. And today I'm a team leader with inviteCHANGE and working jointly with Janet really to co-create the difference in different countries and different nations. We do have really a big project now, and we do have many things just going on the pipeline. Just a little bit of housekeeping before going on. For specifically professional coaches, this is considered to be a CCEU's credit work, and the word for calculating your 2 hours as CCEUs is authentic. And the final word is going to be just announced by the end of this discussion today. So please write it down. The word is authentic. Okay, great. For other housekeeping thing, please, for any question, just put it in the chat pod, and then we'll take care of it, and we'll go ahead as an interactive discussion in here. So Janet, the whole floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm really honored to be here and to share this conversation with you and all of you that are either listening on Facebook or you're listening here with us on Zoom, or maybe in the future you're listening to the recording. As I was sitting with Ahmed and talking about this particular event, it's our final one as a team to celebrate International Coaching Week. And it's concluding a great many number of festivities that we've had around the globe with different audiences talking about the positive disruption that coaching is societally, to business, to government, and also at a personal level. How do each of us continue to sustain a sense of growing into more of our own potential? And this really is the promise of coaching. And as I was talking with Ahmed and preparing for today, he was speaking about the tremendous amount of transformation that's occurring in Saudi Arabia and throughout the Middle East. And dare I say, in my travels everywhere in the world. Each country, each continent, maybe not the penguins in Antarctica, but all the other 6 have their own flavor of economic transformation, social transformation occurring. And we're at an exciting time. Maybe everyone has arrived at a moment in their lives and said, I'm living in the most exciting times. And it occurs to me that, yes, that's what human beings do. We really do invite change in the same way that we named our company, because we can. And when we talk about resilient leading for societal shift, what we're really saying to ourselves is, the promise of harmony, the promise of well-being, the promise of community coming together for a common purpose, and dare I use the word love, right? To love each other in a way that is whole and resourceful. This is the dream we all live to. And even in the most horrific of conditions, whether that's war or Ebola or governmental breakdown or economic collapse. We've seen over history the rise and fall of, depending on which historian, 8 to 11 civilizations. we have inherent in us as human beings and as communities of human beings, resilience. It is fundamental to the human condition. So then what's the bigger question that we're in? It's a question of what is stopping us from being able to produce it in a sustainable way. And the common denominator really is us, it's people. And so when I was putting the slides together, Ahmed, you were actually putting this in the context of the economic and societal transformation that's happening in Saudi. And I thought you might just take a moment to share what your perspective is about that and set context for us for the remarks that I will continue with.
Beautiful. Yes. When you talked about it, I'm going to put it here clearly, just with our beloved Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's a philanthropist and visionary and a leader. And maybe you hear about his meetings with Bill Gates and different around the world, just going ahead and making deals. And the first time in history, just ladies in Saudi Arabia, they started to drive. So we do have this trend of women empowerment. That's one of the trends happening in Saudi Arabia today. And also we have lots of focus on health, entertainment, businesses, entrepreneurship and innovation, and of course, leadership. So all of these trends happening towards something great moving forward. And maybe you have also this signature, we call it Neom City, very strategic project that's gonna really bring and attract the greatest minds of the world. Is to go ahead and create lots of innovations and services and solutions that help multi-level industries and creating the difference. So with this time of change, Janet, from all of your observation and national changes, economic changes, making that difference with leaders. Maybe sometimes we have that self-talk, specifically executive leaders, or maybe entrepreneurs today, and women. So where are we going with that? For some people, it's opportunities. For other people, they might perceive it as a challenge. So what could be the underpinning psychology, motives, or perception, or biases, or drives? If they see it differently or reconnect it differently, they will bring more and claim more of the results, performance, market share, sales, whatever turnaround they want to make in their industry. So what's an insight in your worldview, Janet, that you would love to share in here?
Thank you for all of that. And I'm going to say to everybody, my insights are quite simple. Having been classically trained in economics and finance, I think I spent the first 20 years of my professional life using my intellectual horsepower and the power of study and research and assessment and experimentation, trying to find just the right answer. And I've spent the next 20 years of my professional life realizing that it's simpler than that. And while there's great value in studying best practice and having some acumen in understanding how to think about systems, which is what any organization is. It's a living, breathing entity. Even in those words, you start to see the clue here, which is the only true competitive advantage, whether you're a government or a company or a nonprofit and you're wanting to differentiate, or you're a single person who is wanting to bring something to the world. The only source of competitive advantage is us, the people. It is who we are and who we're being and how we see the world and how we interpret what's happening and the way we connect to something that is deeply empowering and unique, which is the essence of each of us as a human being. And unfortunately, what happens all too often, particularly in commerce, is that we have over-revered the performance outcome. And how do we produce? How do we drive results? And we do it at the great cost of the people who are the ones that deliver those performance results. We forget that as human beings, we do have a responsibility to manage our energy. And lots and lots of human research in the last couple of decades are pointing to the fact that when you create a climate inside of a system that is heavy with emotional insecurity and therefore economic insecurity, the system starts to die. It goes to a state of inertia. So perhaps you're a part of an organization that's in that cycle right now, where there are lots of layoffs, there is uncertainty about the future, there's a missing strategy. The place to examine is not what's happening right now, but to reflect on what was the moment when this shifted. Who were the people? What were we paying attention to? What assumptions did we have about what was coming? And what choices did we make at that time that set all of this in motion, that has us in this current place of spiraling down to maybe dissolution? Because ultimately we'll find that we made some choices, and we can unmake those choices in order to go forward in a different way. I'm just going to keep bringing us back to this notion that unless we are pausing our do drive and examining how it is that we are interpreting the world, really stopping to say, what have I made important? And what are the trade-offs that I'm navigating? We're not going to find the way forward that doesn't repeat history. And so maybe you're thinking, Ahmed, about innovation. There's lots of that going on in Saudi Arabia right now. And what are the roots of innovation? There's a certain necessity that leaders are able to trust, that the ideas that are bubbling up, that are originating through their experience of the context that they're in, that this is the source. We must have self-trust of those ideas and allow them to start to come into physical form, to tangibly be created. Lots of people wait. We wait to see, are the winds right? Is there someone that's giving me a handout that says, this is the right path to go down? Entrepreneurs who create success in the world don't wait for the hand. They move forward. Now, how do they do that? They do that from a deep self-trust that the idea that's emerged is enlivening enough for them to take the risk. They stay connected to the hope of that, and it overrides the doubt or fear about whether it is the right time. How do we decide those kinds of things? I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. I just want to lay some groundwork here. This is this image here on the left-hand side is a way for us to know the playground that we're talking about. In my work with organizations over the years, we talk about creating sustainable excellence. No one-hit wonders. That's a reference to baseball for those of you that might not have heard that phrase before. And this notion that how do I get really good at something, get my education, get my practice, get some experience, start to have some wisdom, and then how do I transfer that from myself to others? And how do I do that on a scaling basis so that I can have a very large organization? Some of you that might be listening may already be in that situation. Well, I want to break down for you some of what you've accomplished, because for those of you that are not yet on that pathway, it will give you a sense of what's important to be thinking about if you're wanting to initiate an organization and grow and scale it up over time in a sustainable way that brings excellence. So at the center is a core purpose. What is the reason you want to be in commerce in the first place? Who is the customer you're wanting to serve? What is the contribution you want to make to them? This comes deeply from the heart, from the gut instinct, not just from the good idea, but the good idea in action, in motion. And this is the discipline of articulating a mission and a vision and a set of core values that are the intrinsic quality that you want to be congruent in word and deed. Principles are the way in which we engage with each other as we're fulfilling that mission and making progress towards the envisioned future that fits with that purpose, that main reason that we have created the institution we've created in the first place. And that it doesn't matter whether we're talking about $1 billion company or we're talking about a single person who's a practitioner as a professional coach. The conditions are the same. It is essential that we sink our roots deeply into that core purpose. And then, as we lift our heads up, clear, we might even think about this like the backbone of the human body is that mission, vision, values, and principles. It's what has us stand up. I've been hearing this phrase a lot lately. People will say, well, I stood up that part of the organization, or, I stood up that function in my department. And that's what we're talking about, right? That there's something that enlivens us. We lift our heads up. We can see the whole horizon around us when we've done that core purpose work. Now, the next step of this is, what are the strategies that enable us to be resilient in the face of change? We must understand, how have we brought ourselves together? So I use the word constellation because we have all kinds of ways we can structure the way an organization faces out to its customers, and the way we structure, the way we face into our workforce, our colleagues and our subordinates and leadership. And just like the stars in the sky, we make lots of different constellations. Let's make those decisions in ways that is taking advantage of the talent that we have inside of the organization and aligning it with the best way to contribute to customers. And of course, we want every day for people to have a sense of play and purpose and potential, that the opportunity to be in a continuous expansion of their own contribution. That's what organizational health is all about, as opposed to what I was describing earlier, when we have an environment where people are afraid to take action. They're afraid to exercise judgment. They're afraid to experiment and bring a creative thought into conversation, which leads ultimately to a sense of feeling scarcity, fear for being able to hold my job. And we ultimately get smaller and smaller and smaller in our relationship to our work. So it is a leader's responsibility to pay attention and notice the forces that are creating that, and begin to examine, how do we model the kind of day-to-day experience that we know creates organizational health for us and that attracts people to come to our organization. So this is thinking about succession. We have a principle from our American Indians, the First Nations up in Canada, Aboriginal peoples have the same tradition. How do we think in 7 generations? How does what we're going to say today affect 7 generations into the future? This is what succession is all about. It's not just who will take my job so I can get promoted. There's an awful lot of companies who think that way. And while that's important because you want to have continuity of work, the bigger strategy here is, how does what I've envisioned as the core purpose of this organization stay alive for a long time? And it's a discipline to be able to think into the future in that way. And of course, it's tied directly to capacity. What are the capacities, if you will, that every level of the organization must develop in order to be sustaining in excellence? And this goes directly to culture evolution. Culture defined as the way things get done around here. Now, some of you might be familiar or have studied Edgar Schein's work. He's probably the one we turn to, all of us as practitioners in the human development field, to think about what culture is. And we often simplistically think culture is about the artifacts, the values plaque on the wall, the articulation of vision that we put on a poster, or the celebration we do at the end of the year of the accomplishment of our goals. Those are all artifacts of the culture. But underneath that are the values and how we're living them. And underneath that are the assumptions about why we're there. And it's important, if you want to have resilience in the face of change, that we're paying attention to those tacit assumptions about what has people choose to be in this organization and bring their life force to it. We spend the majority of our waking hours in our professional vocation, more than when we sleep, more than what we have with our families, more than in our houses of worship. It is the largest component of our awake time as human beings. It calls for us to have more diligence and attention paid to how we create the environment with each other. And this is how we fuel resilience. Now, the blue ring on the diagram is about the day-to-day operations. And again, the words here are very focused on people because that is your true competitive advantage. How do you acquire the talent that lines up with who you're about as a company? How do you bring them into the organization and get them productive quickly? How do you develop them on an ongoing basis? How do you attend to their performance and ensure they have what's necessary to meet the changing environment? How do you engage with them to find out what do they really experience day to day? What are they noticing with customers? How does that organizational learning happen in a continuous basis? And how do you see into the potential? What aspect of this person on this team are we not tapping into that, if we did, would raise everybody's performance another 10%? And then ultimately transitioning, because we want people to have the opportunity to stretch into new capacities as the organization is responsive to the changing environment around them. So this was a big foundational piece, Ahmed. I'm curious what questions this brings up before we move to the next slide.
Lovely. Yes, I'm so much curious, Janet. In fact, I do a question of two parts now as we talk. And one of them, we talk about what's from your experience. Many leaders, they know about, they have maybe even posters about strategy, mission, vision, and values, most of the organizations. And interestingly, they're not walking the talk. So my question is, what's holding them back? And I'm going to just put certain points here from what you just said. You talked about they're not in the pathway. And if they are in the pathway, then things will go ahead forward. And my other question, if they're in that pathway and claiming that internal alignment, in which way the leader, the executive leader, or the entrepreneur, the innovator, or the great leadership woman there, how they will claim going with those great results that's going through any economy, any national change, they have that confidence that they will make or they will create a value, like Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs and Google is a great example. Google just is the birthborn of challenging a severe economic crisis. And just went just ahead like number one, because they served their customers, as you just said in your first slide. They were there where everybody just went out of the market. So where's the link here, Janet? Because people just writing lots of stuff and just getting those consultants from big names like, I don't want to mention, but many, McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, great work. But what are the leadership choices? What's really holding them back from getting forward? That's one. And the other thing, where that confidence comes, where I could make it whatever the economic level is going. And I could see those opportunities and I could inspire to bring the value. So that's a story, but just get me curious on this. Yeah.
Pretty big questions you've just asked there. So I moved the slide forward because the answer, part of the answer is in the problem. But the first answer to your question is that it's inside of each leader. I've sat across the desk from many a CEO who has said to me, how did we get here? How are we in this situation? What did we miss? What didn't we anticipate? Where did our reasoning and our understanding of this environment have faulty logic? And the natural impulse is to want to go figure out how to change our reasoning. And unfortunately, as you can see in the data here, the answer is simpler and very profound. So in transforming their organization, 85% have failed. 54% of the time, insufficient leadership and support. So inside of each leader, to ask themselves the question, where did I set the course and then take my eye off of the compass? And I didn't see that the organizational system, everybody in the organization, was 10 degrees off of the course I charted. And I didn't notice that we'd gone off course. And here we are in front of the iceberg, right? To the reference to the Titanic. So there is a way in which, as leaders, we can be so outward focused, so out in front of the organization that we're not keeping our finger on the pulse. We're not staying engaged with our team members to ensure that they are continuing to see the beacon of the vision we've established for the organization. And it's often taken as a personal failure rather than recognizing that we've simply fallen out of relationship. The connectivity inside of the organization on an ongoing basis. You can't just say a vision and then figure everybody's got it because it's on a plaque on the wall. It must be lived into. Culture is a little bit like a brand. It doesn't have a constructive element to it. It emerges. We observe what the culture is. And what happens for most leaders is they stop listening. Even if they understood how to listen, they've just stopped listening. And I think the how to listen is the second piece of data there, that 62% cite poor communication. Now, communication is a big word. It has lots of pieces and parts to it. And my experience is that most leaders who've had the courage to launch a big company and to run it over time are pretty darn good at being able to say, this is why we're pursuing this pathway. This is the contribution we're making to our customers and to our community and to our shareholders and all of the things that are part of running a large organization. They're very good at declaring the why and the what. Unfortunately, what happens as we start executing on the how, we start to not keep the linkage between the how being congruent with that why and what. And oftentimes what employees will report is we're 2 years or 3 years into a 7 or 8 year change process. And they're asking the question now, why did we do this? How come we're moving in this direction? We're all feeling the tension of the change process and we can't remember. So you start to see people backsliding to old behaviors. And now you've got tension in the system because there's incongruence. The espoused vision says one thing, the way people are behaving with each other is not the same. And leadership is outward facing and they're not listening to the organization and hearing. They need more connection to the why and the what. And then of course, 35% of employees say that they don't feel listened to by their leaders. This is what I'm talking about, that the change process stalls. It hits a moment of paralysis. And I think that we underestimate as leaders. I know in my own professional career, I've had moments when all of a sudden I looked over my shoulder and said, oh, they're not following. Where did everybody go? And I realized I'm holding this very serious subject lightly. And that's by design, because we must not see it as this is my thing to charge forward with. It might be mine to declare a vision as a leader. But then it's our opportunity to come together as a collective, everybody in the organization, each person finding their connection to that higher purpose of the whatever the change is that we're navigating towards, and calling it out when we think we're not listening well to each other. It's all about the people and the relationships. Without this piece being attended to in at least equal measure to the technical acumen of driving results, we will always cause a stall in the change process.
Super, super, Janice, super. Just you ignited my curiosity so high. I'm coming with this powerful question, I guess, which is many people, Janet, specifically when they go for a cultural transformation and they want to really contribute to this societal shift, and making that contribution, which is an aim for many ambitious and smart women here in this part of the world, and many great leaders, executives and entrepreneurs. And I'm wondering that many executives, they go to these places where INSEAD, Harvard Business Schools, and other great schools, these are all great schools, but still many, they come back with great knowledge, yet still the change doesn't take place. So the question is here, the role of a habit, specifically we're going through this changing times, and many habits, maybe they include or having these underpinning assumptions or biases could be fear, could be something else. Sometimes we have certain executives, they go to a place or a company or a corporate, they make a difference and everybody notice, oh my God, they just get loyal instantly and they just feel the change. Other executives to go to same companies or same roles and not many people think, okay, it's gonna happen. So as you mentioned, Janet, it's about the leader, how they really put their vision and believe how to go forward. And I'm wondering, Janet, upon all of this, if there is a concrete example from your past dealing with executives. Of course, we respect, I know the confidentiality of the ICF and the privacy of the clients, but if there's a case, somebody, an executive leader, where they went through the same circumstances as a national change, economic change, and still when the market is going down, they made the difference up. Is there something that you would like to share in here?
Well, there are many. I'm thinking about a leader in an organization in your country who had a global scale project he was responsible for, reporting directly to the CEO, and was given the opportunity to put together, he could handpick his team across the globe, the individuals who would be the highest and best contributors to delivering on this particular project. And this individual had been tapped because he'd been one of those people who'd gone to INSEAD and to Harvard and was always in pursuit of the next piece of intellectual learning. And he was about 4 months into the project and things were not going the way he envisioned. So you spoke a moment ago about leaders who have the courage to envision and set people on a pathway. And while that's important, it's not sufficient, because what was happening is all of these highest and best leaders that he'd assembled on the team were competing with each other. Each one of them was finding an opportunity to showcase their capability. And their meetings were butting heads, right? That each had their own point of view about what the solution was. And as a leader, he was not inserting enough guidance about the why and what the shared purpose of the team was. He hadn't done enough to acknowledge how each of them had a piece of the pie, but not the whole pie. And that it wasn't about one of them coming up with the best answer, it was about the collective coming up with the best answer. That each would have a component that somehow would integrate into a new whole. So we have that crazy phrase, the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. And this is what he was needing to learn about. That his continued focus outward to the CEO and to the executive team about the project and how it was doing, and while sponsor communications are important, he was forgetting the most important, which is attending to his team. Were they staying sustaining in their connection to the bigger purpose? Were they both having their individual motivational needs met, that they were being acknowledged for their knowledge and experience, that they were being acknowledged for ideas, that they were being sensitive to supporting each other, that they were being courageous in experimenting, being in action? All of these motivations must be attended to. And the leader wasn't doing this. So when I was engaged with him as his coach, we started to examine what his habits and assumptions and preferences and biases were about being a leader, about leading a team, about teaming, about how to manage when people are being insecure with each other, which shows up in the form of conflict, rather than trying to manage conflict, which is, in my humble opinion, a ridiculous notion. Conflict just says that there's something different that wants to happen. We must lean in and listen to it more deeply and ask the question, what wants to happen here? What's the truth in both sides of this conflict that we're listening to that would reconcile it and give us the breakthrough to what's next? Anytime a team is stuck, the attention goes to what will move us. And that means that we want to acknowledge and value what's actually happening in the interaction. And this is what I mean by, this is one way of describing organizational learning. And the leader is responsible for that. So we began working in our coaching sessions with what was he seeing? When he was observing behavior in the meeting, what assumption was he making about the source of the behavior that was causing people to be stuck? And he started to realize that he had a whole bunch of assumptions he was making about each person that was causing the conflict. So then he said, what if those assumptions are not true? Which is, of course, the question I asked him. And he couldn't answer. So I said, so what questions do you want to go ask to find out what each of those people are perceiving and what their underlying data and assumptions and preferences and habits might be? And he learned something very interesting, that part of how each of those team members had become recognized in the organization as best in class. They were the top performers, and that's why they got selected for the team, was because they had worked as individual contributors, not as team members. They hadn't actually been on a team where it was necessary to learn how to be in co-creative dialogue. It was a skill or a capacity, you might say, that was missing in their tool bag. So they were simply being what they'd always been, which they'd gotten acknowledged for being a source of excellence. And yet now in this new context was in their way. So as a leader, it was important for him to discover that with each person and to say, oh, my team needs some skill building about teaming. And that's his job, right? As leader, his opportunity and his responsibility is to pay attention to the climate of his team and to be sure that they're getting the support and resources necessary to be effective. And he thought his job was to be the champion, to set the vision, to put the path down, and then let them go at it. And this is an example of how you take your eye off the north, the true north and the compass. Are we staying on that pathway? It will always be the human dynamics that throw us off. And it doesn't matter whether it's, the budget gets cut. It's an external resource. And what do? You got to do something about the scope of your project. Or the customer that they were designing this particular initiative for changes the requirements, at midpoint in the project. For the team to be agile in response to those kinds of changes, they need to have relationship with each other. They need to be able to trust that they have resilience to the naming that you have for this interview today. And the leader needs to be able to hear when those influences come in from the outside. Does the team default to protection and justification and explanation for why they're doing what they're doing? Or do they say, oh, new information. Let's go back to our co-creative process and see how we're responsive to this rather than reactive to it. So I'm describing really the leaders building his own capacity to be with that disruption simply as what is, and giving his attention to the relationship field amongst his team members, and ultimately himself to realize that that's his first responsibility, is to the health of that team. And then he has the opportunity to work with sponsors to say, and here's how we are producing the results that we are, and here are the risks that we're seeing on the horizon. Let me work with you sponsors to see how we clear those out of the way so this team that's in flow stays in flow. All of his attention going to that relationship field with his people.
And Janet, here's something interesting. I might ask a juicy question here. And I guess it might be a significantly juicy question. What about those leaders or smart women or entrepreneurs who see or perceive the situation a certain way, where they're saying, okay, I'm now working in this place and I'm not really the CEO. I'm in a director level position or capacity. And, I'm not feeling the culture is supporting me. And it seems that I worked everything out and I brought trainers, I learned in different schools, but it seems it's not really working. Maybe are they losing hope or saying, no. So let's be practical, guys. Hey, there's no solution here. It's done, game over. So if some people in the past have been through this situation and you observe that, Janet, so what would be a statement that you would really ignite our awareness with, and just really making a pause here, say, hey guys, listen to this. because you saw lots in these capacities. And what would you really offer in this place here?
That any situation, no matter its qualities, is simply the situation. And every human being is way more than that particular instance. Every single person is whole, resourceful, capable, and creative, way beyond what's occurring in any given moment. That's a mindset and a belief system that when each human being adopts it and lives it, they see the next opportunity. So the struggle that you're describing, and boy, have we had many rounds of this in America. There was a period during the 70s and the 80s when layoffs were the thing. Hundreds of thousands of people laid off and spun out because two companies had merged together, and they didn't need the redundant workforce. And all those people being redeployed into other organizations, some quickly, some not so quickly. We're not in that state right now. We have the lowest unemployment in the United States in 50 years. 50 years, the lowest unemployment rate. Now, we have to ask ourselves the question, are they deployed in work that they really want to be doing? And part of the challenge here that you're describing is when we think that our only work is the work that we're in right now, we'll be in struggle. We'll feel the disappointment and the frustration of not having the opportunity to keep working or to contribute in a creative way to something, because whatever that something is, that circumstance is dying. If we were to shift our relationship to it and realize we are more than that situation, we have an opportunity to look out and say, and what is the place for me that will use what I'm made of, what I care about, to its highest and best purpose? If we don't do that step, we are going to suffer because we have our entire identity wrapped up in what we do as opposed to who we are. What is our beingness in the world? And I realize that may sound like a spiritual principle, and perhaps it is. But if you look at the data, that's why I moved to this slide here, we have this incredible incongruence where leaders think they're being inspiring. 70% of leaders say that they're inspiring. And yet, the last survey from Forbes, 65% of employees would forego a pay raise if it meant seeing their leader fired. That is a substantive cognitive dissonance. And it really is a call to action in my book for leaders to realize that they are creating the inertia that creates the downturn by not listening to their employees, by not listening to the culture, by not being invested in learning and really examining, is our compass reflecting where people are going? And if it doesn't, why doesn't it? And what did I stop paying attention to? So while it's true, an employee who is in an organization that is dying perhaps, or they've been laid off, or there is disruption and it doesn't look good into the future, that is an uncomfortable place to be. It's not finite. Just like they got the job whenever they started there, there's another one someplace else to deploy themselves. Even if it means, my gosh, I think about countries in Africa that have been so war-torn. And those communities are reviving by women coming together, and they're planting gardens, and they're raising cattle, and then they're selling the milk, and they have phones, and they have bank accounts, and they transfer money. And out of the ashes rises the phoenix. That is the human condition. We do that. We always do that. So the bigger question, Ahmed, is how does every person stay connected to that larger self when those circumstances happen? All too often, we want to point the finger at somebody as the blame, the reason I'm in this position. Well, okay, that might make you feel good for a few minutes to be angry at somebody. It's not going to change the circumstance. The only thing that will change the circumstance is to look inside and say, what matters to me? How do I tap into my own capacity and take another step forward out the front windshield to what I want next? And the same is true for leaders when a company fails. I've had 2 small companies fail myself. And both times it hurt like the dickens. But the truth is, I had to say to myself, I missed some things. Let me, as I do the next one, think about how to bring that in. And I'm being a learner in my own life because we humans have that capacity. We know how to pick up from our failures and do something else. And ultimately, the McKinsey data here from 2018, it's an inside job when employees are intrinsically motivated. In other words, as a leader, I've created the environment for an employee to feel permission to freely come up with new ideas. I've created a climate for employees to study well, to be focused and diligent, and have a place to use their hard-won intellectual knowledge. I've created a place where we reward boldness. And it's all right if something doesn't quite work out, as long as people are learning from it and they're staying in that boldness. And ultimately, that we're in it together, that we've learned to have each other's back, to see more of who we are, and that place of belonging. Those are the intrinsic needs of a human being that organizational life must contribute to. And they often go unattended because they're somewhat invisible, unless leaders learn to listen organizationally and be fully present to who's here, what is their acumen and strength that they could be bringing to the work. When we do that, that's the vast upside of human leadership. You can see commitment and satisfaction and performance all dramatically improve.
Beautiful. And there's something.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, superbly. Thank you, Janet. And what's coming to me, this is about women. Of course, the learning is not going to be specifically for women. Everybody will learn here, all of us. But when we talk about women, Janet, as the country going forward, just at the legal level, at the business level, and specifically it's happening right now, many women really claiming that C-level share, leadership capacity, senior management, either in corporate ladder or being a leader in a capacity of an entrepreneur to really add value to the economy. And we have lots of ambitious, smart women in this part of the world, so much committed. They want to make a difference and impact. So how do you see anything about women, their work-life balance aspect, 360, relationship, business, and stuff, with these coming trends of change? Because sometimes we might really see it as a face value. Okay, you want to get that position. I'm a strong person. I have skills. I'm intelligent and stuff. But in those times of change, is there something that's underpinning? Even though the greatest talents, they need really to observe to be double productive or to claim more of the quality they deserve in their life and work. So, yeah, what is it, Janet?
So, our entire conversation today is about going underneath the surface. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about what's going on inside of the human being, in this case, inside of the woman, and also inside of the men that the women are interacting with in a culture that has traditionally not perceived women as equal. And you're not alone in Saudi Arabia. That's all over the world. We still have tremendous inequality between females and males in the workplace. And obviously there's even more ripple effects beyond that, but we'll stay with just those two identities for a moment. Human beings inside of our human system, so from a neurophysiology point of view, we have something called a reticular activating system. And it's been able to provide us with a way to navigate protecting ourselves in the world. So our oldest brain, the reptilian brain in the human body, is what keeps us safe. It is what prompts the impulse for flight or fright or freeze or deflection. Those are the most common things that we do reactively when there's danger. And so here you have an environment in Saudi Arabia where we say we want women to step into leadership. We want them to exercise their knowledge and their technical skill and their creativity, and we want them to be on a level playing field in all ways, education and government and running a business. And yet we're at the same time having traditions that don't line up with that aspirational goal. And we have people who have lived that tradition for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decades. It's not enough to have a woman be inspired to want to do something and to have an opening for it. They must also have the sensitivity that the people that are already doing it are coming from a completely different context in history. They have a set of habits that are deeply ingrained because the reticular activating system works that way. So in that column underneath RAS, you see something that says neurofilters. Intentions, beliefs, values, attitudes, memories, language, metaprogramming, meaning I learned something in my teens and young adulthood, and I am still operating from that. It is my habituation because it was the right thing to do. It was what everybody else did, and it worked, and it was successful. Why would I change something? Don't change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? That philosophy. Well, our brains contribute to that. So over time, we build these filters. It creates our mental models. It has us very quickly decide if the situation that I'm in is foreign or familiar. What's familiar, we let keep going. Our body says, oh, I recognize that, and I know exactly what to do, and we do it. Habit, to your question earlier. This is how habit works. But if something foreign comes in, it gets stuck in the filters, and it's trying to evaluate if it's friend or foe. If it's different enough and disturbing enough, we'll move to shut it down. We'll push it away, we'll deflect it, we'll fight against it. And we'll do it very strongly because it doesn't fit with our historical tradition. And it requires a great deal of energy to have something that's outside of our comfort zone when we get disrupted by something, to say, I wonder what could be here. I'm curious if there's something that I would find enlivening. I wonder if I were to engage with it, if I might learn something that I might enjoy. This is a mindset or an attitude. And I think what happens for a lot of us when we're outside of our comfort zone, we're pushing up against that fear. But what if it's not safe? But what if it doesn't work out? But what if I'm hurt in some way? Think about falling in love, Ahmed, right? Somehow our bodies get the agape, and we're in that moment, we realize that we're with somebody that we just find so endearing. It's like they would never break our heart. And of course they will. Even the people that we end up marrying break our hearts thousands of times a day, just as often as they enliven us and help us remember how amazing we are. Neither one is a right or a wrong answer. Right? We're meant to be together, and we're meant to stretch in that being together. That doesn't mean just because we thunk it, it's going to happen. So I was early on, early on in my career, I worked in sales, and I worked in the garment industry, which was very male dominated in New York City. And I was this very young woman from the Midwest. And I remember going to my first sales meeting, sitting at a table with 22 men who were easily 20 years my senior, all white men, very accomplished salespeople. And realizing that I had no idea how to use my voice at that table. So I didn't. And they would tell raunchy jokes, and they would get really loud and boisterous. And I just stayed quiet. I was observing, trying to figure out how to make sure that I didn't misstep in some way. get the information I needed from the sales meeting and go back and do my job. Well, that was my first pass through, trying to push up against the traditional context. It happened again in financial services. However, then I had a little bit more under my belt and I started to find my voice. And I learned to recognize that there was a way in which they saw the world that I didn't see. But if I got curious more with them and they started to educate me, now we're in conversation and in relationship. And boy, did I learn a lot. And I learned really fast until I reached a point in my career when I was pushing back. When I had a voice that knew how to be in relationship on their terms. And this is really the bottom line here, that for the women who are aspiring to step into the world and to find their voice and to be courageous, we have two responsibilities. One, to ourselves, never give up on who we are. And secondly, to see who is the other. Who are they? What do they care about? Where do we maybe have a place in common so that the reticular activating system doesn't see us as a foreign object, but starts to see, oh, there is something common here. There is a place of common ground. And to start step by step, conversation by conversation, to build relationship that allows that to open more fully. So pardon the scientific piece here, but I think it's really important to understand that how we as human beings change is by building the familiar ground rather than competing to try to stand apart from each other. That's not how our bodies work. It's not how our brains work. Neuroscience has helped us to understand that everything we do in life is based on our experiences. We take in information, we take in energy, we make a deposit into our experience bank, and we can get really stuck in a rut and only do what's familiar. Ultimately, if we want to be responsive to the kind of transformation that you're talking about in bringing that equality for women into the workplace and into government and into education, we must get comfortable with that moment of that something is foreign, but it's only foreign for the moment. We will get curious. We will be in wonder. We will find the place of common ground from which to start to build. So what do you think about all that?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Janet, for that. And interestingly, I have one more question from my side before we open the questions to the whole group in here. But really, we have lots of people in this place. We have a multi-billion-dollar industry leaders here. We have people from the educational sectors at really high level leadership positions. We have from different industries. And interestingly that I have that question for all of those leaders, entrepreneurship who's going towards innovation, creating a difference with their ideas, women who are aspired with this grounding that you just talked about. So what's the role, I have that question, what's the role of generative coaching, which is, Janet, as you defined it, is about originate, create, learn, and produce. That means it's a result oriented. It's not just another talk, hey, we're gonna learn for 2 days, some skills workshop. No, it's an actual claiming of a market share, of a society change, of an economic shift. So how is the role of generative coaching will make this resilience leadership and claiming that shift in any economy, in any national or social change?
Thank you for the question. And I have a little bit of a visual aid here for everyone so that we really anchor ourselves into those four, what I would call the four capacities. And no particular theory here. If you look up the word generative in the dictionary, you're going to find all four of these verbs: originate, create, learn, and produce. And the reason that I, in just very simple terms, came to this notion of generative was that I kept watching leaders that I would work with have some natural instinct toward 2 out of the 4. Oftentimes, CEOs and particularly entrepreneurial CEOs are really good at originating. They are able to have a deep well of self-trust, and they bring forward an idea and they go manifest it. They don't spend a lot of time doing focus groups. They don't do a lot of research. They probably are not all that interested in process. They find something sufficient to actually get it to market and go make money. So they're pretty good at originate and produce. But of course, as you can probably hear in the description I've just given you, that means they probably are not going to play very well with other people. Not very patient. If people can't keep up with their ideas and keep up with the pace of producing results, they don't stick around. And so the discipline of creating teaming, the discipline of listening, right, the learn capacity, are both ones that are not in their toolbox. And for a very long time in organizational life, we said, that's okay. We want them to keep doing their originate and produce, and we'll bring other people on the team who can handle create and learn. And that does work for a little while, but it's its own self-fulfilling prophecy of limitation, because that leader will exhaust the people that are in create and learn because they don't value it. It's not balanced in themselves, and so therefore it becomes disregarded. This is one way in which they set the compass and they put it on the map, but they stop looking at the map ever again. And when the people are creating and learning, they realize, but the compass isn't right. We need to turn 10 degrees, but the boss doesn't see it. So what I started to see in the coaching process is that if a CEO could start to recognize that he or she was not very effective at learning and at teaming, that was the place to build capacity, to balance, not eliminate, but to balance the natural strength in originate and produce. So for example, instead of the leader being the one who went on the road to be sure that the product got sold, they built a sales department. And I'm putting this in really simple terms for example's sake. They built a sales department, and that CEO was a role model to everybody in the sales department to help them start to see what was special about this product and what would customers value about this product. And in the interaction of that transfer of knowledge, what's going on? Learning. And the sales team is now co-creating with that leader. And the leader doesn't have to go on the road anymore. Instead, he's got the 10 people and the sales team who are going on the road. Now the organization is starting to scale up. And that leader has more time to reflect and say, I could do new origination. But let me find out what's happening with our customers with the last idea that I said. Because now I understand that if we're learning about the customer experience and we bring that into our origination process, we don't have to chase all the ideas and have 6 of them fail. We can chase 6 ideas and have 5 of them work. Because we're paying attention to balancing all of the generative capacities. And that starts with the leader, him or herself, fulfilling that growth and development in their own capacity as a human being, and that comes from the authentic self. Now, many people have no idea what their authentic self is. Mostly because we know this from psychology, the field of psychology, that we all must arrive at adulthood with a certain amount of egoic development. We have to have an I. I am something. And then we realize that we exist with other people. So we start to have strategies to maybe not be fully who all I am, because we need to be able to work with others. My story about having worked in sales and then financial services, right? I had to learn how to adapt to be met in those situations. But then I arrived at my own sense of self and self-confidence, and I realized, you know what, I don't need to do that anymore. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can have a point of view, and they can have their point of view, and we can be civil and explore. I started to live in a sovereign way, self-ruling, self-authoring, being a choice, being my own authority about how I wanted to relate to my life. And I realized that was freedom. When I could stand in my authentic self, I had the freedom now to develop in all of the generative ways. And to me, this is the opportunity that every single human being has. When we say maximize potential in coaching, that's what I think we're up to, is giving people the opportunity to be generative in every choice that they make and to live in a sovereign way. That's the path of true fulfillment that nobody can take away. And it's sustaining. So there you go. That's the generative wholeness way.
It's so interesting, Janet. I learned that from you. And what's coming to me, being now a head and board member in many boards, more than 17 boards, setting the strategic scenarios and the alternative directions for how to find the challenges through these economic conditions. And all what it is, as you said in the beginning, is about the individuals there. But the economic scale, national society change and stuff is just the scope and the space for impact. But what are our behaviors and our decision-making, choose and capacities? That's what's different. And what's coming to me, the curiosity, when I'm building the governance and the process for board members, the first thing, so if you want to make a change, guys, here, let's not only look at the numbers. Numbers are what exists today. But if you want to go to a blue ocean of value innovation, like Steve Jobs, like Google, like all other these companies, so we need to think differently. And what's coming to me, just the idea of, okay, what about with our leaders, Saudi Arabia, either entrepreneur, women, business leaders, executives, what capacities are they really accessing today from the generative cycle? Are they in the originate? Or just only the produce, as I learned this from you as well, that make a burning stage for when you just produce. So when is the time to make a difference? And that's what you related to in the beginning, which is pausing, having a time to think and be in the right pathway, which is not many executives or leaders having this time. They just do without stop and getting out of those habits and accessing more of what they already have within. As you just said, Janet, they have much more beyond what they think, but maybe they don't have the time to think of it because they need just to look at, oh, board members, I need to create this $14 billion, whatever. But okay, let's have the time to pause to access what's already within. But not many have that awareness where it already started recently, but not having that awareness, especially at executive level and many levels in society, to connect between the qualitative and quantitative. Okay, so it's another training, it's another coaching, but oh, I don't have the time for it. But once they go through it and really feel the tangible results, accessing that generative cycle, it creates a whole different story. And they get more aware and feel confident more about what they really already have within, but they just didn't look at it. Wow, thank you for that. And oh, Janet, so what do you suggest now? Because I'm just going to tell the audience that we're going to open the space for your own questions in the chat pod. And interestingly, the surprise that Janet's going to pick a real life session in here, just picking someone who's going to be coached on stage live. You have a challenging problem or an executive from high-level corporate company, you're an education leader, whatever your name, your stuff, so we don't care about that, so just it's private. But just say your case, whatever it is, and Jen is going to offer a free live or world-class coaching demonstration here to get a different results or getting an action plan by the end of that session. So what do you suggest, Janet, to get forward? Do you suggest to have a break or something?
Yeah, but I want to pick up on something that you just said that I think is really important before we go to the break. You've referenced this notion of time, and I talk about this with leaders all over the world all the time because it is the most common refrain. I don't have time for, and you can just fill in the blank. And it always takes us down a pathway of who's doing the choosing. Who decides what you give your attention and time and energy to? What is the basis that something makes the cut and it gets to be on your calendar? Are you managing your calendar, or is it managing you? Are you scheduling your priorities, or are you prioritizing your schedule? So there's a way in which we make time the enemy when it in fact is simply a commodity. It's a little bit like the air around us. It's like the water in our physical bodies. Time is a construct that we made up. And we let it be the excuse rather than really taking responsibility for how we engage it. And ultimately, when we have a leader who says, I don't have time to invest in myself, I don't have time to spend with my people, what they're essentially saying is, I'm not interested in growing and learning. and I'm not interested in relationship. I don't respect my people enough to give them my time and energy. I'm going to respect something else more. The next investor meeting, the next new idea, traveling off to get some new customer. And obviously, there are trade-offs to every decision that we make. And ultimately, if we are not paying attention to the relationships that are core, in this case, our people in the organization are our competitive advantage. If we're not attending to the climate, giving our time and energy to it, it actually creates the exact thing we don't want, which is economic and emotional insecurity leading to inertia and poor performance results. So they can't afford not to give their time. But unfortunately, an awful lot of practitioners get afraid. They pale in the response to that question. Oh, I don't have time for a coach. Really? Instead of getting curious about it, what are you giving your time to? And how do you see the connection between what you're giving your time to and the results that you're producing? And if it were ideal, as opposed to where it is right now, maybe it's somebody who thinks they're doing a great job with managing their time. Great. What's 10% better? So either it's a struggle they're in, or they're inspired to actually up-level their game. Either way, it's all about understanding what's the basis of the choosing I'm doing. What am I making important? And by the way, I've got a whole bunch of people around me that are in the same question. How do I, as a leader, create the climate to evoke from them wiser choosing about their relationship to time? Because what they're doing isn't producing what we want. Make sense?
Wow, Janet, thank you so much. As usual, magical. And Janet, so what do you suggest right now? So we do have now this demo of coaching, and we have this space for question and answers from the audience. So what do you suggest to get forward?
Well, as you said, why don't we go ahead and just take a couple-minute break so people can get a glass of water, whatever they might want to do to take care of their physical bodies. And why don't you and I have that conversation while everybody is on break?
Beautiful. Super.
Okay. And welcome back, everybody, to Resilient Leadership for Societal Shifts. And I am delighted to tell you that Ahmed has decided that he'll be my client so that we can do a demonstration of coaching. How about that?
Just excited, as usual. Meeting you, Janet, always just exciting and enlightening. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Wonderful. Well, I'm always thrilled to support you in this way. And you know me, I love coaching, so it's all good. And I want to invite you to maybe take a moment to shift out of interviewing me to really being with yourself and examining what's an exploration that will be useful to you being more resilient as a leader in your work in the world there in Saudi.
Oh, Janet, wow, like if it's intuitively just taking place now. In fact, yeah, being just a board member, multiple boards, sitting and creating strategic direction with people, partnering with them and creating the difference. This is beautiful. I love people and staying with them, and just I love to hold that level of accountability if just that environment allows, and influencing that environment to be in the co-creation zone. And at my heart, as you know me, at my deepest self, I just have that transformation capacity. I love to see the difference. I'm a coach, so that's it. And I want to bring in the coaching leader within in more resilient space. So whatever we call it, it's a leader, it's a manager, it's executive, it's a consultant. At the end, I'm a leader and I'm influencing something. And my aim really in this discussion, being an entrepreneur in different capacities, advisors, coach, consultant, trainer, or other board members space level. I would love really Janet, to claim the highest level of generativity, where I could make that societal shift with executives all around the world. Already at a level there, but I want to claim more of an ultimate level, more and more. So it's a journey, as I learned from you, it's a never-ending journey. It's just a work in progress. And just, I want to heighten my awareness on my deepest beliefs and just getting out of my limiting beliefs with regarding to this connection and really claiming more of that value, put into action and making turnaround and getting magical results in the society and the globe. Yeah.
Your aspiration and inspiration is clear, as is your deep caring for others to be resilient and to be successful in the face of what's happening there in the country. And I'm wondering, in our time together here, what is it about resilience that you are sensing is kind of right on the edge of your awareness or understanding?
Resilience. Yeah. Interestingly, I feel like if there's something standing in the way with all the progress that I'm doing, with all of the things and the great feedbacks I'm receiving, I still feel there's something more, there's something standing in the way. I don't know, is it fears, is it worries, is it ambiguity, what are the trends and stuff, while I'm doing it already to others, but sometimes getting in that zone of the unknown. I want to step more to be in comfort and in agility with the space of the unknown. So I want to increase my relationship there.
So I hear the claiming and increasing relationship of the unknown. And when you are experiencing right now that there's something in the way, what's the physical or emotional sensation of that for you?
You see that metaphor when somebody want to run fast and that you stand and you're trying to see what's around and you're watching, okay, there's a hole in here. There's something standing in the way in there, so I need to watch out. But I want to just be that superhero, just crossing everything and making that change and impact.
So your from state is the high alert and your to state is marathon runner.
Yeah.
So in motion.
Well, sometimes it's not really.
Yeah. Okay. So standing still in alert versus being in motion toward what you want.
Yes.
And I'm wondering about the truth of your standing still. It's not my experience of you. And I'm wondering what the source is of your self-assessment that you are not already in an ongoing generative resilience.
Oh, thank you, Janet, for the question. Yeah, you reminded me it's not the usual, but why this is really taking place, where this thought or self-talk or an idea just came to my system. I really don't know. I don't know, because yes, I know about myself. When I decide to make a difference, I make a difference.
Yes, you're a man of action.
Yeah. And powerfully, I live it with so much presence and high level engagement, and I affect everyone I meet, even. Turn around in leadership, making the executive just go ahead and think, wow, I didn't know about that. And they take a decision, improve the culture, make the business, either it's a government, it's private, whatever it is, the individual.
Hey, Ahmed, pause for a second and tell me what's different right now from a few minutes ago when we started this conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I feel more excitement. I remember who I am in the first place. Yeah, and I remember what I did. Yeah, but interesting, why? So why these thoughts are coming? Is it a perfectionism call? While I know perfectionism is just another box. So being perfect is actually not high, it's low. Yeah, interesting. Why is this really coming? Well, I know about myself that I'm that courageous and the person who's taking really the action make the difference. And it's already there, the evidence is there. But why are those ideas coming to me?
when I acknowledged you as a man of action, you began to speak in a much stronger voice and made the declaration or the claiming that you were seeking. And so how does the other voice, however you would describe it, serve as a check and balance, or in some ways a partner to the strong voice that serves you in some way?
Well, I feel the other voice, or maybe if I could sit on the positive seat and the bright seat, I could see that voice is a place where it pushed me towards making a bigger difference, because I want to get away of that voice. So it's like an encouragement, or it's like a catalyst, something that tells me like, hey, just
way, huh?
yeah, yeah, that's the value of it.
So what opens up as possibility if you hear that catalyst voice and give it some credence, some value?
Yeah. I guess it's interesting, yeah, zooming out maybe and seeing the bigger picture. How not be in pain with it, but how to enjoy its contribution to the bigger picture.
What's an example that comes to mind as you let that in?
Yeah, I remember just a very, very far away, long time example where I used to be in university, where I need to read lots of books and stuff, while I were not really interested in reading lots of books, as you know. So, but it was a pain for me, yet it pushed me to develop other ways, like the mind mapping, for example. I used the mind mapping, and I started to summarize the whole book in like 3 pages. And I remember every word. I put visuals, and I get those straight A's in there. And many of my friends, they said, okay, I just see them just study for long, long hours. And that was one of the techniques I used to teach people about. And it just enhanced my creativity. Even I see the whole book is so much summarized in 1 to 2, 3 pages. So maybe it pushed me, because I was willing, of course, I was willing to make a difference, because I guess if this well is not there, definitely nothing will happen. But that will was there. I was passionate really to cross. And in fact, I was so much even unique. I was very known in my university, my professors and everybody know me, that I do have an original idea always to create. And one of the secrets was this mind map that helped me to overcome the too much reading and too much details, to focus on the bigger picture and just really connect it in my creative and adapt it or tailor it to my own style. That's yes, that was an idea.
So come back to this moment and what you're seeking to up-level, to expand, to have a bigger impact. How might you take this insight and apply it here? Like, mind map's the metaphor. What's the mind map metaphor for what you're wanting to manifest now?
Thank you, Janet, for the powerful question. Wow. I guess using that behavior, that capacity that already I have within, as I know, and access more of it in finding more ways. This could be a driver for me. Not like in the very, very past to complain about it, but now my perception gets shifted to see it as a positive resource where I could access this memory. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to remember more this image or this story of my university days as more of a reminder to me when the time comes. But I guess, to access more of that capacity to create more ways to impact executives to create that shift, a societal shift with the national economy that we have today, because they already have it. It's just, you know, they need to have that thinking partner to create the space. They have it all. It's just about to use what they already have and have the thinking space to be more strategic thinkers, more strategic leaders rather than just strategic doers. I guess,
Will
yeah.
you say that again and own it instead of having it out there on the leaders? Own this for yourself.
Yes, yes. I see a yes in here. I just feel it. Thank you, Janet. I know. Thank you very much for that. Yeah.
So we were going from standing still on alert, scanning to see where trouble is, to being a marathon runner. What's happening for you right now?
Well, I guess I'm gonna reframe what I said. It's not really about being a marathon runner, or not to stand still and watch the holes and these stuff on the way. It's about choosing to be in that generative capacity where I could know that I could originate when I set my mind to, anytime, any place, in any economy, in any country, in Mars, so any place. So I believe that I have this and I could claim it anytime. I already have it. Just about being aware of that and just make the decision to claim it and take that action.
You also demonstrate that when you have the will for that, that you're a learner. Your mind map is an example of that. So how do the other two pieces of generative show up? Create and produce.
You mean at the university days or now just now?
No, I think now is where you're focused.
Yeah. Okay. The create and produce. I guess coming to my origination of really what touch people, as I said in the beginning, the customer value, being more attached with my client. I already have this amazing relationship with my clients, and paying more attention to what they want, originating something out of there. Then I start really to make more creation, more solutions for this market and this economy. There's always an opportunity. Even in the ancient times where they didn't have the resources that we have today, they made much more progress. So in any economy, there's no limits. I guess it's always here. But if I access more productions, I guess this is what I need to do next. More programs and more spaces. Not to be really booked in these board membership work and stuff. That's part of the creation, of course. But I need to create more ways. I need to stand a little bit to create. Yeah.
And you've described that the rhythm begins with remembering that the part of you that sees the potholes and the difficulties is actually an ally. So how do you sustain your relationship with the ally going forward here?
I don't know what's coming to me. I'm just imagining like if I'm hugging this ally, but I want to be just more concrete and just on it and feel it in my body and my heart. Wow, thank you for that. I guess I need to shift my perception and accepting that any element on this earth is meant to be for something, and it could be utilized as a resource. And the metaphor that's coming to me, or the analogy, is just like the chessboard. So you have multiple, pieces there. No one of them is wrong. They're in this earth for a reason. It's about how to strategize and how to use every capacity that situation. So every element is how to be used, and I need to move my thinking. This is the shift, where not to focus on it or see it as something that might lowering the impact, like the hall I see in front of me, like the other, I don't know, picture, like whatever in front of the street. No, not also the marathon. No, it's about really believing, even if that hall is there in front of me, or even if that picture is just standing in my way, there is always a strategy, and I could use this as a resource. For example, I could fill that hole with something and to cross it to move faster or more quality. So it's the perception of what's limiting and how to see it as a resourceful, which is, I guess I'm teaching this as well, is this one of the leadership capacities, how to ignite the positive. And that's an amazing remembrance. Thank you. Thank you, Janet, for that. Thank you.
What is your way of keeping this concrete and present as you go away and practice this?
Yeah, how to put it into action. I need to train the muscle every time. So I'm going to put like a picture or reminder everywhere, because that's important in the change process. Nothing would change unless I'm willing to change. And to be willing to change is internally, and part of it is to create the environment that help me in that. Could be just many pictures everywhere in my different offices, just to put them there with my partners. And just tell them, guys, whenever you observe me talking about a challenge, whatever it is, just remind me, okay, so Ahmed, how could you access your capacity of originating at this time and creating or learning and producing? I'm going to teach them, of course, about the generative wholeness practice. And the other thing is for my own, at my home and everywhere, either it's in a business or relationship with anything, my game, my fun, my entertainment, just I put it on the wall. Or just read about it, maybe just having a picture about it and putting, remember that at this time when I have this thought, so to train the muscle of the greater shifts and the capacity, I need to practice it, because the mental muscle, as I learned from you and from many sources, that the mental and the heart muscle, if they train and that psychology is there, then I'm going to make a difference as a leader. Doesn't matter in whatever the capacity or the scope. Yeah.
What's the image that comes to mind that you will put everywhere, personally? And
sorry, I didn't hear you, Janet. Sorry, what you said.
What's the image that you will place everywhere, so that it reminds you when you have that thought and inspires your team to catch you in the act of choosing?
Okay. Interesting. I'm going to put a circle, a big circle, where I'm bigger than the word. And I put like a line where I'm in the middle, and there's a left and right, and I put the word shift at my head. So when I remember that left side, then I'm going to say, hey, where's the shift to the right side? And in the middle, smaller circle, this is the word and the creation of the programs, the learning, and the producing. What executives I want to target today, maybe in government, ministries, blah, blah, blah. I have already some, but maybe something else. Across the Middle East, across the globe. So how to put that circle, which is not the smaller, I'm going to be the bigger picture, and creating the impact there to zero in to little circles that change the economic shift in the middle, the national shift.
By when will you create this image so that you can begin the process of building your ally relationship?
Well, usually, you know me, sometimes I just say I'm going to postpone things to later time. I just do have that. But I feel excited today, just I'm touching and remembering something. I guess I'm going to, right away after this discussion, to just go at least a basic sketch, a basic one, just to put it there. then I'm gonna enjoy and put all of my creativity in it to grasp the whole meaning and just take the first action with the first thing that's coming to mind next tomorrow morning.
Who
Yeah.
will be on your team to keep you on track with this as you have that image alive in all your spaces?
Well, I guess everyone. I'm going to talk to my friends, to my board membership colleague, and everybody that I feel they have the wisdom and they could work in encouraging and creating the space to partner with me. So
no sliding back then.
No sliding back. I guess, yeah, just getting more to my bones. Yeah, thank you for that. Wow, Janet.
You're
It's
very
interesting. Thank you.
Are we complete enough for now?
Yeah, for me, I enjoy, and I hope the audience really gets something out of this, because they observe, they could really feel and touch. Everybody's intelligent to feel and touch something. And I hope that will also create for many executives and leaders, we're human at the end, but occupying that leadership executive level, sometimes bombarding with those big numbers and economy and stuff, which is making the leader access less than who they really are. But getting in those spaces of creation, they magnificently just do something different. And they know it. Once they go to a vacation, something like Einstein or Newton, who just had that apple going from the tree, having that space, then the origination will take place if they're willing to. Yes, absolutely. Wow.
You've modeled for your kingdom the power of coaching, and in a short 20 minutes, you've had an opportunity to have a breakthrough in your own relationship to being generative, and that's the beginning. Imagine working over 4 to 6 months and examining every area of your life where you're wanting to up level and to claim more and more of your generative capacity, what the ripple effect is when we're operating at that next level of our potential. And this is really the promise of coaching, is that it gives us a very safe place to take the risk, to stretch beyond what's comfortable, beyond our habit, and imagine a different result, and then take small steps that fit into our lifestyle to begin stretching beyond what's comfortable to a new pitch, a new state of being.
Oh, Janet, it's so interesting. In the past 9 years, I wasn't like this, but with coaching, I get shifted. I'm moving more and more. And interestingly, how just somebody move and get out from their own mental habits that's really locking them for even a lifetime. Many people even die just, being retired and just get out of their seat. Then what they're really claimed is just getting in this, I don't know, it's a tunnel where just go in a dark way, or they just don't know what they could do more, or what would have been doing more. Instead of just doing the same choices that they choose, they could do and claim more choices if they're really willing to.
So what's the guidance you would give to your audience, to your people there in Saudi, the wisdom you've learned from being coach, from being clients of a coach? What would you say to those people that are in that dark place and don't know how to reconnect with their sense of will and possibility?
Wow, I guess, yeah, as you said, I just formulate the things. It's like 3 things. First of all, be willing. Let me say this in Arabic because it's related to even our spiritual and divine space. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. In Arabic. It means in English, even God, He won't change something in you unless you decide to make that change. Then God will be beside you, make that change. So that's from religion point of view that we have it here. And the interesting thing, I guess this summarizes the number 1 step, being willing. If we're not willing to do it, then nothing will happen. Assuming that we're staying in certain capacities and habits, definitely won't go, we will not get otherwise. That's it. Changing the habit, you make a difference. Not changing the habit, you stay there, whatever you claim. So you stay in that zone or that circle. You don't make the willingness and the decision. The second thing, which is definitely get a coach. And I remember even the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, I just He just visited Saudi Arabia like 3-4 years back, and he talked about smart cars and this stuff. It was one of the meetings. And even Google Schmidt, when you go to YouTube, he said, I have a coach. So everybody needs to have a coach. So I guess having a coach, and maybe the underlying assumptions here, which is now shifting nowadays for many executives and many leaders, they assume that the coach is somebody who's better than you. He's a consultant who tells you what to do. So he's better or she's better. But that's, of course, not the way. Coaching is just so much working in parity with you in a partnership. They don't know the answer, but they will co-create the answer. So that's the capacity that we need really to revisit and really consider. Even the top in the world, Google, Microsoft, Bill Gates, they have their own coaches. So please make the time and just claim that life that you really desire. Yeah, I guess these are the two things. I don't remember the third that you want to say. But yeah, I guess just take the action. That's it. Take the action and make all of these realized. Yeah, that's what's coming to me.
Bravo. I think the region is very lucky to have your brightness and leadership and capacity to follow your aspirations and manifest it. It's really a pleasure to be with you today, Ahmed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Janet. And I would love really to put the question back to you. What would be a statement, Janet, from what you felt, from what we talked about, from the whole scenarios, your intuition, and in those times of change, really to claim and make the contribution? Being an ambitious woman, an entrepreneur, an executive with multi-billion dollars industry. So what's the thing that you would really share and see and make people see and feel more of?
I think the most important thing is to remember who we are. To hit the pause button for a moment on all of the outward facing activity and contribution and achievements. Those are all a little bit like putting the icing on the cake, but we forget we have a cake. Inside we are capable beyond our wildest dreams of manifesting the society we want. And it doesn't mean it happens instantly because we have a thought, but it does happen in a very contagious way when we walk in the world in a sovereign way. And we no longer are manipulating our own presence. We're not manipulating others' presence. We are in acceptance of each of us is whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. And when we stand in that strength together, we will always be a whole greater than the sum of the parts. It all begins inside.
Wow, thank you very much, Janet, for this. And really, I love it. Thank you so much for the contribution. And this edgy insights, if we pay more attention to it and zero in, then this is where the willingness and the action take place. And yeah, thank you very much. And just if there's now, if you could really share the other password that for the professional coaches to claim their hours.
Well, guess what? It's presence.
Presence.
Yeah. And I see here that Sarah wanted to know if we could talk a little bit about what worked in the coaching, and that would be fine, Sarah. Why don't you come on? And Ellie, you're welcome to come as well.
Yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, it was a great session. I really appreciated the MCC coaching level and the skill that you bring to it in really helping and challenging Ahmed to claim his catalyst voice, because you were picking up on that he kept putting it out there in a global level, and you brought it to him again and again, from that global level to the local, to the personal. And the way that you did it was very artful. And even with shifting to where he would go to his action steps to reinforce that was very smooth. And I learned as a coach, you know, to not make it so abrupt. You really artfully moved him and didn't just take the first answer, because the first answer might have been nice, but it wasn't necessarily going to create that reinforcement to create it in a day-to-day level. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Anything you know, Ellie, or any questions for our MCC here?
It was outstanding, obviously. I'm just absorbing everything from Janet and how to be a better, more present coach. And what I enjoyed was how Janet was able to bring Ahmed back to his original agenda, if you will. And as he would get off on stuff, is to bring it back. Okay, where are you now? What does this mean for you now? How will this move you forward? And you could see that it brought Ahmed back into his body and back into his self. And that was certainly very apparent and magical to watch. Thank you.
It reminds me that when I was first coaching, I would think I would prep them, or in my mind, prepping them for the experience during the coming week. And remembering that coaching is to whatever experience that the client wants, to have it in the session, to have the feeling and the whole person experience of what it is they want. Now they have it, they're being witnessed in it, and they go out into the world, to their day-to-day world, knowing what that experience feels like. It's not in the future, it's in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really important. That's the great value of the last 4 competencies. Creating awareness first, that you could feel the moment when Ahmed had the insight. Oh, that's how I do this. That's how I claim this. And he already started building his list. And it's really easy to get seduced that that's enough, and it's not. And as Sarah said, to keep probing, to have the client make almost like a screenplay inside. You know, how will this show up for me? What will be my back door where I won't be trustworthy? Who will I put in place to support me? Mm-hmm. Do I make it concrete so that it's vibrant and actually almost vibrating in the session, and it becomes a lab for the lab experiment, if you will, for what they'll do day to day as they exit. Yeah. Fun, really fun.
Wow, thank you for that. Lots of co-creation in here. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Sarah. Yes. Thank you, Ellie. I love that quote when you said, bringing him, brought him to his body. Mm-hmm. So I just got back and I felt it, because not feeling it, as you also said, Sarah, it's not really about the future, because many people, executives, women, stuff, sometimes think about the future and they get locked in that place. And the breakthrough happens, I felt that many times, and even now, which is bringing them to the present moment now, mm-hmm. to really claim what they already have, not just sitting in the future, in that place where, oh my God, when is this gonna happen and stuff, and just they get stressed and their visions is not really realized as they wanted it to be. But being in that present moment, then the future definitely is gonna be a byproduct of this all capacities that gonna be accessed. Yes. Thank you for that.
Bravo. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that concludes us for today. Thanks so much. And to those of you watching the recording, I hope you found something useful and will take away some new practice for yourself to stand in your full generative wholeness. That's our wish for you. And that is the pathway to resilience as a leader. And we'll look forward to seeing what's happening in your world. Let us know. Come talk to us on Facebook and ask questions. We're always available for that. And thank you again for hosting, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Janet, Sarah. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everybody here. The audience, executives, women, entrepreneurs, thank you for being here today. And just definitely, let's co-create the value together in this world and make a difference. Steve Jobs did it. Google did it. Everybody is doing it. It's just about the claim and the status in here when we really decide to and go forward with. Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you. Take care.